A Cloud of Eyes. Jay Carlins, 2024. This was written in 2018. The field is loud with insects full of angelica and chervil. Don't you dislike poetry that sounds extruded, that sounds so rich and heavy with every line? Poetry poets learn some way in the hallways and byways of Poetown. The byways of Poetown, the musky sidewalks and dusty passageways corrupt with tradition and corrupt with the breaking of tradition. The halls by the field full of bugs and growth and plants. Oceanthus, Celestrina, Catocala relicta, traditional plants and beings. The field is loud with life. Insects, growth, and plants. Insects, growth, and old poets. Insects, growth, and old plants. You can stew them with acidic fruits, the old poets, and let them dissolve. This prevents the distress of being unable to process efficiently. It's a sedative, the good kind, a field loud with insects, loud with material and history, loud with ancestors, ready to be dissolved, you or them both. A symptom of language. Outmoded old ways, they are close to wisdom and truth. Look at neuroscience and beyond the words. Look at common sense beyond the words. It is less than clear that this exists as a symptom of language. Sense exists as a symptom of language, meaning the spells or manipulations are a kind of straw horse. Meaning is a spell. His eyes changed. It happens as a sort of failure to process. His eyes changed place and time. Then it was loud. This was the temple, deep cavernous eyes. In a cloud of smoke, beautiful songs. It was alive. Appeared exhausting at all, and place was not words, both good and bad, blacked out the sky. Christmas trees. In the backyard, we used to have a place of wildness, pine trees, horseradishes, artemisia, wormwood, tarragon, a chaotic space between ours and the neighbors. Horseradish improves digestion, removing mucus and waste, the slime and byproduct of seeing. It improves circulation so that the fluids aren't fixed, not overmuch anchored or frozen like Pinus longeva, Amaracea rusticiana, Artemisia dracunculus. Wormwood is tonic, kills bacteria, enriching and destroying bothersome negativity, sacred to the dragons, sometimes bitter, sometimes not. Now they have a bonfire in my town to get rid of those old trees, those trees digesting themselves in a dump, piling up. People come and sell fried dough at the bonfire, merry-go-round, rink, loud music out of big speakers. Don't forget this fire in the backfield of some old farm, people circling in the mud. This is what you do with depression. You get a little loud sometimes and you burn things in a safe but also messy way. While the carnival goes on around you and someone has lost their kid, it is night, but eventually they do find them. Like Pinus longeva, Amaracea, Rusticiana, Artemisia, Columbine. Explorer and creator making things less real. Meanwhile, the great explorer found vitality is opposed to this fantastic escaping and denying. What the explorer found was the truth about vitality, being vital. He killed many people and conquered that last thing, death. He discovered many things in amazing ways. He wrote them down to make the whole thing less real. The explorer was an artist, thus he created many worlds. The library, the fire, and two perspectives on love. The library is like a forest meadow. All the old ideas decay there beautifully and new materials grow on top. Why are poets always talking about love after they start off with something interesting and strange? In art, the surreal is more important than love. Who has really made an argument against love? It is enough to make an argument for it, for that sweet bay or lovage of a feeling, digestive aid of oneself and other, stimulating the appetite, making the heart pump and organs gyrate, increasing the inner fire that consumes the world. The logic of anti-love is like an owl of purpose, meaning a separate kind of being. It's easy enough to make this argument and a little bit sneaky, like showing a picture of a beautiful landscape. You have to enjoy and agree to enjoy it. It moves you and makes this argument too easily. But then the people who make an argument against it are mostly monsters. Interesting maybe, but not someone I talk to. But those fiery people are fine too in their own way. They've discovered and created and made things less real, and they are all still creative discoverers. The owl of purpose, a separate kind of being. It was divine honey, it was healthy and reasonable. We went in and out of ourselves in the most meaningful way possible. There was a schedule of meaning, but it was the monkey mind. There was no overseer, but that doesn't exactly address the question. Beauty, power, and vitality are very rich. The entire equation, somehow it all functioned. There is a computer, or in some other way it was confining. The schedule of meaning was confining like a computer. He had a dream at the same time. He had a dream about food and exercise. He had a dream about art that seems like it will be there for a long time. He had a dream about work. It was made of cedar, shame, frustration, failed dreams. People talked about society. He had a dream at the same time. John Ashbery is probably the first poet who helped me get poetry. How wonderful that I'm alive and have read your poetry. Thank you, John Ashbery. How unhappy that I feel compelled to get published somehow and throw your name around and not just have a normal life among Whorehound, Mellowlow, and Mint, not just live a normal life. But then I've always been one of those people who feel they deserve to be famous. I've been meaning to buy a copy of Flowchart for about 15 years, but it's expensive. Maybe this year I'll harvest sweet clover of normalcy, Mariabum of healed and smooth finished normalcy, mentha of meaning, being able to stay with the meaning of ordinary experience instead of needing to show off with words and demand the proof of existence art provides. Now that we have attained this precious human life, do not waste it meaninglessly. Your eyes and photos look watery and haunting, both kind and extremely threatening, a little like your poems, but not completely, because your poems weren't all that scary, just that they destroy intestinal worms, mildly antiseptic, as it said that in transmission there's a sense of fulfillment, connection, and complete destruction of those little infectious thoughts. The downside of ordinary life, those thoughts and memories which believed in refuse to go away. Stealing vitality from nature. You can make me light, you can make being vital. It helps not to think, so be it. It helps to think. This is sad. Thought is a process we engage in. It helps to think more about culture such as downloading the storm. They stole ideas off death. They stole ideas of death, the decency of the Americans. On some level, I've been meaning to buy in, but it's expensive. We tried to understand what mind is and what happens to it after death. They stole death. They stole ideas of reality. They stole faces of culture's discomfort. They had collections of blurred out faces. The ocean of time gets larger and smaller. They have an ocean or two there, old New England, drunk and high on the beach. When I was young, I would go to the old beach, but I don't remember this at all, as if drowning in lemon balm, which calms and uplifts tension. I don't remember this at all because I was young and my memory is bad from years of drug use. Sometimes my wife will tell me about recent past events which I can't recall, like waves of lemon balm, and gets mad at me, and I get a little scared because this is not so many years ago. The oceans around me recently get larger sometimes, but in reality I don't panic so much at their depth and threatening pervasion of time and space. I am happier now, saner, healthier, if not better. Old ideas, blood and buildings. One is built of steel, illness that keeps one from speaking or acting. One is built of gold, patriarchal ideas of male and female. One is built of blood about confusion. Many waves were already clear. The building dissolved who people are. The blood of any point in time, the blood of some point, the blood of how to act. Beings in the air of alienation and hysteria. When the building of alienation manifests as a kind of hysteria, it is made of cedar and high-tension confusion, a paralysis. It helps to not think now. It helps to not think more sadly. It helps to think death is real, and it helps to think as an accident. It helps to think more because the storm is imaginary. It was a rough stone, the social foe, the decency of the thing, the rougher the wall. One time I switched. You can make medicine with rose hips, rosemary, marjoram, and tarragon. You can make medicine and not just live a normal life. You can make medicine, but then I've always been interested in sorcery. You can make medicine even if you don't deserve to. Then he glanced at the meaning that nobody else saw, but it's expensive. He saw words in the now, beings in the air. Do not waste it meaninglessly. Things were about to happen and time was much more kind, bubbling up in itself, a little like your poems. The guests showed up. Stories of small things and old things. It is so good when a poem tells a story, and the love of it is simple in its being ordinary, like the old rotting field in itself, myrrh, myrtle, mentha with catnip, basil, primrose, allium, melissa, like the cared-for garden without concern for competition, like the deer that walked gingerly around our house for a year or so. That time I might have gotten Lyme disease from a bug bite and my leg turned purple and the black spread up the limb until I was feverish. My heart felt strange. I ended up in the emergency room on an IV. It's amazing how ordinary the emergency room is when you feel scared but also ashamed to be making such a fuss. Such are the little stories of life which is close to death, for people like me with few stories to tell. Poets. Poets get too comfortably uncomfortable. They get too cute, like an awkward joke between smart teenagers. They laugh and laugh, but the atmosphere just gets worse and worse. If they would just stop being themselves, it would be a lot better. If they would just be themselves, it would be a lot better. If they would look out the window of their minds at the trees on the rocky outcropping, real trees, maybe even 100 years old, very nice, fall-like, because it is 50 in December, surrounded by marjorams and oregano, geraniums, parsley, aniseed. The world goes on. People write and grow and live and walk around on lunch breaks, like when I go into the convenience store and the dark-skinned South Asian clerk is a little rude and cautious with me, and I wonder if the regulars here have been assholes to him. I'm glad for bad poets and poetry. They make my job easy, tonic for the system, curing irritability of the ear at bad song. Maybe the important meaning of tonic is to tone things up in terms of bringing the good out of the mediocre and the bad, almost like clarifying. Styles as silences. I get bothered by the pointlessness, but who doesn't? Real change, real knowledge, traditional rhythms of satisfaction, these things can be invoked by style sometimes, and the timing of that invocation and arising depend on many factors. The discontinuous nature of speech allows for style. If it were solid, it would not be moldable. The world goes on. People write and grow and live and walk around on lunch breaks, like when I go to the convenience store and the dark-skinned South Asian clerk is a little rude and cautious with me, and I wonder if the regulars here have been assholes to him. I'm glad for bad poets and poetry. They make my job easy, tonic for the system, curing the interplay. It wouldn't even happen. The interplay does not tend to envision the environment and different forms of silence. Stylistics as forms of silence. If this hasn't been discussed openly before, I hope to at least mention this. The implications of skill creating health of work and craftsmanship, but the opposite of an egocentric pick and choose your own path type of thing. The sleep is magic even. Waking and sleep mix. Sometimes things become transparent, clear, lucid. Irritations. What is it to be irritated? It is to have the world not cooperate when we know somehow it could, should, or has. Is it to be clumsy like the words burnet, cowslip, and primrose? These are mild diuretics and can be applied for headaches. When irritable people get headaches, as if all the disappointment with the world is building up. A big argument with the world that could be won somehow, and this makes it all worse because once you get to that point, it usually can't be. So time plays in. It becomes an argument, not just with the world, but with time, and there's the sense of having missed your chance, but almost being able to win. Is irritation to see something you love and reject it? Is it a matter of being jealous of someone or something who's doing better than you, even just being themselves better than you? Or is irritation a matter of wisdom, seeing someone fucking up and making a mistake that should not be made? I look out the window to a wall of brick and windows, a park full of burnet, cowslip, and primrose. The poem I've just read has something, but not enough of it. It is not full of flowers and weeds. Irritation has something to do with earnestness, maybe too much of that sunlight of feeling. One doesn't exactly get irritated with monsters or con artists, scared, hateful, competitive even, but not irritated because they have some power. Like a wall of light, like a building being built by men with tens of millions and access and confidence of vision. Does irritation build up into power? So that if I let myself get irritated enough over years and decades, eventually I become a monster of some standing, a confidence man, a twisted old beach hanging onto a sand hill of emotion and experience? Or does it weaken me, as I'm worried that it would, as people suggest when they tell me again and again that I have a bad temper? Needless to say, they do not. They are patient. Here's a better idea. That is both, and the measurement of it has more to do with the moment in time and the where than with any actual objectivity of seeing. It is irritation or something else deeper, like a park of old beech trees, burnet, cowslip, and primrose waving in the winds of time. The movement of past and present, those silent rhythms. When I was young, I would sense that control over circumstances rests mostly in the body. I get a little scared in society. There are so many different people. Trust engenders expression. Drop of insight deliberately falls away from rhythms of satisfaction. It's amazing how ordinary it is when you feel scared. Such are the little stories that howl, that arise in the space of traditional rhythms. Silence is the mark of nonverbal communication. The love of it is subtle, odd-numbered rhythms. The old field rotting has some freedom. Someone else's garden. People get caught up in humanistic representation of God or gods. It's very easy to do and easy to laugh at also. Why worry about those old myths? Why worry? Why concern yourself or think unwell? Well, the whole science thing doesn't do it. Those people usually end up lost in the mind, and the whole not mattering thing doesn't work either. Same deal, Mungan, or they end up just working until they die, lost in weird labyrinths of their own mental creation. It is actually better to die in someone else's labyrinth, lost. This is the one thing I've learned. This is the one form of devotion, to be lost in someone else's labyrinth. Passageways of lavender, morinda, noni, turmeric, sea holly, someone else's living beings. Alienation is not the end game. Very nice. The overall point is, I hope, good. The South Asian clerk is a little cautious with me, and alienation is not the end game. The world is not ideas that seem interesting. When irritated people are panicky, let's take a step back. A big argument with the drama, it usually can't be coded criticisms of dominant cultures. It is a matter of being identity. Who is doing something? Just being ourselves is a panicky affair. I look out the window to identity. Here's a better idea. Simple, but this simple model does work, like a park of old possibilities waving in the winds of description. Kasamunar Mungan. It turns into ego style, ego sadness, like we're always watching our back, paranoid without having smoked any weed, just paranoid that we exist, and this someone makes us exist as our own paranoid fantasy. Oh, to be free of checking, to be free in simplicity, in a rock and a wind and a painting and reading a poem and just loving it like a pop song. You know that you love it, and there it is, like underfoot angel grass, frangipani, kasamunar, and it doesn't have to become a life or death struggle. Or if it does, then that's good too, because it is simple as life and death. The guest would work it out. It would work out meanings to these terms. This has been said. Other things have been able to understand what I've been saying. The guest would work it out. It would work out meanings to these terms. This has been said. Other things have been able to understand what I'm saying. The sky was blue at various points in time. The birds were white forcefully enough. Something would mean a sort of conclusion about one's place, but the words were cosmos. This was always the issue. The sky was blue. This needs to be reiterated. It was quiet, history as a cycle, knowing very well what it means to be human. My old friend. I wrote a lot of poetry in college and took a long time to write it, and I was reading a lot too, and I felt like I got it, but didn't at all. Not like I do now. I showed a poem to an old friend. He didn't get it. He told me so. I got very angry because I knew there was nothing to get. But sadly, this didn't happen in this order. He'd said this years before about poetry that was more confessional, stuff I was writing before I'd gone back to school. And the poem he'd read was about him, I think, about me being annoyed by him, so really, it was perfect that he didn't understand, thus turning the moment into a little poem of mirroring. Think of a pond mirroring growths of copper pod leaves, mamuang and farang groves, the mirror of others. These days I write simpler stuff. I get it less, although I'm more stubborn when I do. Haven't seen that friend in forever. Wild around the words. In other reality, let's look at the elements of hysteria in terms of magic. Words and joy. Your misery is the real thing anyway. Fertility of mind, mind roams, mind too. The inability to sleep as one is awake, to have an area of wildness that I will be writing, being in a globally connected world that is highly influenced by being, frozen. This is the way materialism works. The mind is just the mind, solving mind problems. This is American Buddhist art. Obviously, the whole endeavor is about ambition and self-importance, the trends and lingo, the constant striving and energy. Feel good about yourself because of something, otherwise it will be flat. Something is amiss. Meditation, this might be the best. It's not work, it's not virtue, it's art. That dream I forgot. It was so good, I was going to write it into my novel. It was one of those dreams that actually was like an incredible story with a logical progression, but then I never wrote it down. I tried to remember it, but my brain won't allow me. It's possible people don't write enough about that back and forth struggle with one's own mind, which is separate but also the same. The lady appeared. The overall point is, she appeared in a dream. The South Asian clerk is made of cedar. A panicky affair is like a game. Death recognition, magic, the sky was blue. He was a perception. Like a park of old possibilities. It's like a game with certainty, clarity, rules, and I look out the window. It's not laziness or cynicism to offer quiet. I keep writing. I keep writing poetry as a way to avoid working on my fiction. Okay guys, don't edit too much. I'm very serious, don't edit too much. It doesn't just get embarrassing to hear and read and too careful. It has that feel of prancing, the feel of someone putting too much makeup on. You don't think it loses some blood when you keep operating on it? Also, don't trust writing teachers past a certain point. They're not writers, they're writing teachers. Most teachers are stupid anyway, and school is dumb. All that stuff you thought as a kid was mostly true. Not that school couldn't be better, but it's done wrong and forces teachers to be managers. Maybe it'll be different in 100 years, probably not. In the meantime, get through it and know that you're lucky if you get 1 or 2 good teachers. The system is designed not only to suppress them, but to destroy them. The system of teachers in school is like weeds around a garden. When people think it's the garden itself, it invades this overthought system and chokes out goodness and actual benefit. It edits itself too much. The mind is just the mind. That is why you keep going forever. There are so many different people. Something is amiss. When I was young, I would sense that controlling the audience is vampirism of the soul, words and joy, waves of lemon balm, some kind of understanding. Vanity is clothes. We were trying to understand what mind is. You can make being into vital criticism. It helps to not think, so be it. Each one had power from one's God. It helps to think about culture such as many waves were already clear. Address the question to worldly realms. Mind, it's expensive. What happens to it after death of jewels and precious metals, dreams, downloading the storm? Poets versus death. Poets write about death, but I wonder how close their contact is with it. For me, it is not very close. For so many in America, not that close. Is it honest to make the claim that it's nearby on either inner or outer levels? I don't know. Death is something they say you can have a relationship with, but this is like one's relationship to the sun, always there. So is establishing and having just a control move or worse? Is it too much to even think about making such a friendship meaningful? Is it a relationship the same thing as a relationship with language? When I run outside and see a coyote trotting along, stopping and staring back at me pretty much fearless, is this a relationship with death? Well, that's an oversimplification, but sometimes in this world of complexity we need to oversimplify to even know what simple means. Sometime later I see another coyote, or the same one, standing in the middle of the road as I drive by, just staring at me and the other passengers. Wild ideas burst out with meaning as some sort of medicine. It made his eyes change. The storm is in a cloud. It was a rough idea, the decency of ideas. You can't make an owl of purpose or of ideas. It's too confining. To be wild is to be unconfined like the sky. When he glanced, people talked, bubbling up in the guest. He had a dream. The guest said it was divine. She looked out. Melodramatic alienation manifests. His deep cavernous eyes were imaginary. Beautiful songs of reality, exhausting how unfortunate I feel. Meaning a separate kind of medicine. Their spiritual practices of the meaning found that vitality is opposed to meaning. They saw people conquered in many amazing ways, a little bit like your poems. Many worlds, a different person. Harvest manao fruit, harvest mali, and malus rosacea. Sad indulgent poems for sad indulgent writers. Do you know how lucky you are? Not that you can't be sad, but does the audience have to love you and your words and support your foggy, effusive complaint in order to promote this sense that there's something profound to it when it's just a confessional thing? Is it just sickness being coughed out? But then are angry poems any better? Same sickness, mungan. Yes, they are, and I will tell you why. Because they find something and sharpen in. Finding what is wrong is fine, and sometimes even when it's not a matter of justice. Appreciation is the greatest gift of life, emblazoning the whole being, and without the ability to cut things down, the forest can't grow. Appreciation can't happen. Predictable versus the fire and the discontinuous. I get bothered because the walls were fragile. The television grew branches, traditional rhythms, and the discontinuous nature of speech. Two responses to this are relevant. Prayer and meditation are like free-flowing hysteria and alienation. Sleep is magic. Even old poets are predictable. Fairness, justice, they are said. The owl in me. Some realities like nature come out of healing and heal. Some realities like nature come out of delusion and cause delusion. She disappeared, she reappeared. And flames of infamy, an owl manifested, dreams in the way, the edge of town multiplied as she vanished and came back, the city changed, morphed, and grew. The walls were fragile, they were like locusts. The walls between me and her, self and other, they grew branches. Their neighbors, she grew branches of thought and stylish energy. She became my neighbor, the person opposite. Responses to this are relevant. It pulsed inside them, it pulsed. That separation and tension, the ideas and rivers of feeling, love and hate. Things like prayer and meditation were like a beautiful dream beat. But what were prayer and meditation really in comparison to the actions of a moment? The little gestures of touching a face, holding, serving food, cleaning, laughing, being silent. When I walk about, I love nature mostly, but when I write about it, nature seems unpleasant to talk about. When I walk about, I love nature mostly, but when I write, it seems different, unpleasant to talk about. Oh, all roses and garden rue. Some poems tell a story. Some awful poems tell a long story, like Milton. I will not be converted to Milton, and I will encourage every reader and writer here to be somewhat open-minded when it comes to college classes. All those professors will try to convert you to their cult of Milton, Chaucer, or Wordsworth, and it might take. You'll see the light, but then again, will you read any of them again? Will that light still be warm and interesting when you go back to reread, maybe as you put the books in boxes to give away to Goodwill or Salvation Army? Or will the words fall very flat and leave you wondering, what was it exactly that was so great about Wordsworth, Chaucer, Milton, Byron, Bishop, Plath, Ginsberg? It's fine to be stubborn sometimes. Stubbornness is like homeopathic medicine. The little poison creates a cure when you know. It is okay to be stubborn occasionally, especially when you've given it a chance. We've all been carried away when the teacher reads something they love, but this is not enough. Poems these days tend to be shorter, and there are reasons for this, but there are many poems that aren't grandiose, don't require a leap of faith or initiation. I take this back as to the last point. Many things in life require initiation: food, places, rituals, people even. People seem ugly to me at first meeting, and then I warm to them. I know I've lost something of horror or truth when I've crossed over into that sunlit world of liking and acceptance. This is the opposite of nature. The rich. Do you think you can tell rich people just by looking at them? I think I can. There's a kind of bodily integrity to them, a lack of openings or gaps, a smoothness. My wife and I sold our house, so we have some money finally, and I wonder if I look like that very occasionally. I wonder if the rest of the world looks at us like that, Americans. Better than being poor, so you can see what people are sometimes and their being together or not, like you can look in a garden and see the mind of the gardener, which has nothing to do with the words hawthorn, silver birch, cytisus, scoparius, populus, picea, abes, juglans regia, but then you could, with enough training, look at the words themselves and see ancestors behind them in those letters and sounds. Drowning in understanding and silence. They have an ocean of meaning. When I was young, I went to different sorts of other places, as if drowning in an understanding of what mind is. I get a little scared. I sense that it is a dangerous God. Silence is the mark of one's God, the old field, rotting of ideas about confusion. It's amazing how we are already clear, like a weird point in time. She envisions the environment in different forms of silence. They went to spy on watered-down mystical traditions. She could sense that control meant to think now, some kind of imaginary society. Death is real, and it is an accident, more so because it is imaginary. Traditional rhythms are medicine, even if you don't know the meaning. Some freedom from movement, meaninglessly about to happen. Everything is fun. Everything is fun again. This is what art is. This is what art does. I am so happy. I am glad that art can be light and superficial. Decency versus aggression. Beauty, power, then it was loud. He had a dream. Ideas, numbers appeared. He stole the various owl of purpose. They stole ideas of the guest, the decency of the divine, an aggressive place and time that pulsed inside them like a beautiful dream, deep cavernous eyes, and beautiful flowing songs. Beyond worlds, many words. Life was hard. It was healthy and reasonable. The walls were fragile. They grew branches, but it was the morning. All time tends to become a function. All time tends to become functional. Somehow this impacts the outer. In some other way, it is loud with insects at the same time. Society, loud with ancestors. They have a bonfire of sympathy, using energies as a distraction. Somehow a good practitioner is sad. The outmoded old ways, they circle around culture. Same thing. I read the same poem many times, and each time it is different. But that is not so important unless talking about constant change is something we're going to focus on right now. It's when you go to Dunkin' Donuts in a new place and every Dunkin' Donuts across the country is the same place, a portal to that same very experience of being in a place. Are poems the same? Maybe good ones are. Is it good to have art contradict itself? It is a matter of how it does this. Does it communicate the uncanny? Does it alter your body? Or does it just confuse? If it just confuses or just clarifies, then it is much less. Knowing a language. The storm is the interplay. It was a rough magic, but it's an expensive ruined house. Writing like this, he saw words. It was bubbling up in the guest of time. He'd married a different woman, a different person, a language. He had a dream. She disappeared. She reappeared. There was a dream of the way. She looked out and the edge of town multiplied. Criticize. For anyone to tell a great artist, a really great one, whoever that might be for you, to do the right thing is utterly crazy and probably also unhelpful because it would stop them from doing what they do, which is create great art. Art which disappoints occasionally and is flawed, but great art nonetheless. The way a cow eats grass and shits out dung. Who would criticize a cow? Who would look at the fires of dried mango leaves, old brooms, garbage, and realize that they are their own thing and the smell of smoke from the road is pleasant? A life of magic. A life of magic breaks the world's laws. Break the world's laws. The ocean is loud. Build a prayer. It is a human. The waves stole an owl. The words are a symptom of discomfort, but nature is kind. Understanding is expensive. Some number of eyes had conquered them. It's cloud time, a cloud of eyes, a life of magic. Break the world's nature. Make a bonfire of dreams. We are imperfect, but we owe it to the world to be good people above great artists. There is enough great art already anyway. We trust illness when we shouldn't. We trust pointlessness. We trust meaninglessness. The death horse had beautiful blood. They were nice, and it was the ancestors, meaning time. It was time that manifested. The words are a symptom of alienation in the ancestors. The forms come alive. Books. I hope there are always books because books are beautiful as objects, as collections, as something to engage in with the mind. But of course, they will not always be there. Someday we will move past them and eventually the world will end. Or what if it doesn't? What if we discover someday that the idea of sun implosions and explosions is wrong, or the idea of the universe expanding and contracting? Scientists can't even decide if oil is healthy or not, let alone how the universe happens and then goes away. Imagine books being around forever, expanding, taking over the world, covering like leather covers a foot, like mint will take over anything it is allowed to, like dandelions, angel grass, crabgrass, mentha, peperita, spicata, gentilis, requeni, villosa, like words. Here's to books being around forever. Society dreams. Historically, he found that people were separate from society. They were in the branches of a dream. Health owns your body. Beauty owns your health. Meaning is a form. It's a formality. Clarity now. It's so amazing. We have had mystical experiences of light knowing meaning, which was predictable. It helps a people. It helps a culture. Those little worlds. The guest is the magic of that. Cavernous worlds of honey. Society dreams yourself. I had a theory. It was not the ambulances. It was not the walk, the ability to walk, to move, to be free. It points to a wildness, beauty around the nonverbal. The poems are escaping rhythm's function, a time of confusion. Your words manifest. Your words manifest ideas into songs because many have talked, many ancestors talked. Somehow in themselves, eyes conquered them. Understanding is expensive. Life being worthwhile. You assume that in order for life to be worthwhile, we need to attain some special state of happiness and peace, and that this is spiritual, and then hopefully, refresh this special state as often as possible to a kind of hard, glistening sheen over the soul. Or maybe it should just happen if you're really good. That armor should just happen very often, and you're happy. Gardens grow themselves. This is my style, very lazy. When laziness works, it really works. Functional imagination. Fairness is a matter of craftsmanship. Dream down into yourself, find understanding. Western perception trusts the wild beauty. Success and change pulsed away in the cities. It's a simple building married life. meaning paralyzed magic. Happiness is functional, and the people, the ancestors, took medicine, smoked, and in the blood it is loud, said things. It was imaginary, and changed fragility into clarity. The real, the self blurred in hysteria. The dream of language is overrated, like dream language speaking of a craft. Being isn't meaningless. Their house was an unknown song. Their house was beauty. He felt scared to understand what was happening. It's just something of the old work, confusion magic, a spell we're all under. It's a hard problem, being themselves. Truth as a guest. Your movements are vital. She was an owl. The truth is normal, bubbling up into the moment like a guest. The distraction was subtle societal rhythms. The words tried this game. What is not dissolved? What is not dissolved in the sky? This confusion is a cautious exercise. Rhythms digested otherworldly sounds. The dream beat leads to a point of vitality. In the geocentric realms, the poets multiplied a mark. Put things into a bonfire of ego. Americans are reasonable, melodramatic, ideas of decency are precious to us. The discontinuous ways were a game. The owl was a game. The owl was stolen. The owl was a rhythm. It was quiet. The more so mind was loud, as was time. Fertility stormed the blood. Symptoms repeated to make a point. Electricity. I saw a bobcat in my dreams a long time ago and forgot until recently when I was reading through an old journal. I saw real bobcats for the first time last week. First, one running in front of me, then two running together into some mamwang trees. There is some constant interplay between the actual surreality of the dreamlike world and the desire for a dreamlike quality. I'm saying they exist side by side, the actual dream and the hope for, yearned for dreaminess, and when they press on each other, the feedback produces electricity which arises. Not whenever we want to. Well, not whenever we want it, but it does appear. Yeah. Electricity. I saw a bobcat in my dreams a long time ago and forgot until recently when I was reading through an old journal. I saw real bobcats for the first time last week. First, one running in front of me, then two running together into some mamwang trees. There is some constant interplay between the actual surreality of the dreamlike world and the desire for a dreamlike quality. I'm saying they exist side by side, the actual dream and the hoped for, yearned for dreaminess, and when they press on each other, the feedback produces electricity which arises. Not whenever we want it, but it does appear. Art infused with the fire. I am pointlessness. Television and nature are speech and knowledge. Do we choose health? Craftsmanship is the opposite of pointlessness. Information is spiritual. The art is loud with insects, like containing a prayer. It pulses particularly when approached by the ancestors. It's predictable, the old poets, like a sedative, the magic of sleep. Arise the old poets in a bonfire of practitioners. They grew branches. The walls were always fragile. Somehow this impacts the use and importance of art. Look beyond the words, less than clear, the symptoms of language. Poems and poets. When you like a poem, you like a poet. You want their world. You want to move into their house, then you take it over and kick them out, but it's okay, because they've already moved on to writing another poem.